In just 6 seconds, Pam Bondii didn't just refuse, she dismissed Epstein's survivors as theatrics. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She pointed her finger at the congresswoman asking the question and delivered her verdict like it was nothing. "I'm not going to get in the gutter with this woman. She's doing theatrics." The victims heard every word, and in that moment, her entire defense collapsed on live camera. Because what she didn't realize, the cameras weren't just on her. They were on the victims behind her, but nobody is telling you what was actually in those files. And once you hear it, everything Bondi did that day will make a terrifying kind of sense. The hearing had barely started when the first tremors hit. The House Judiciary Committee had summoned Attorney General Pam Bondii to answer for the Justice Department's catastrophic handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. The room was packed, reporters lined every wall, camera operators jostled for position near the witness table, and sitting quietly in the back rows, barely acknowledged, barely introduced, were the women who had survived Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking network. They had not come to protest, they had come to watch, to finally see the government that had failed them for decades sit down and answer for it. They had earned that much, or so they believed. Bondi entered the room with the confidence of someone who had been briefed, prepared, and assured that this would be manageable. Her posture was deliberate. Her expression was controlled. She had survived courtrooms, campaigns, confirmation hearings. She had faced hostile rooms before. She sat down at the witness table, straightened her jacket, and waited. She looked in that moment completely untouchable. But the cameras had already captured something she didn't know about. And the congresswoman sitting across from her had something in her hands that no briefing book had prepared Bondi for. Pramila Jayapal of Washington had spent weeks reviewing the documents. She had spoken with advocates, she had read the testimonies, she understood the full scope of what the Justice Department had done and what it had refused to do. When her turn came, she did not reach for statistics or legal citations. She did something far simpler. She gestured toward the back of the room, toward the women sitting silently in their seats, and she turned to face Bondi directly. Her voice was calm, controlled, almost quiet. "Those are Epstein's victims sitting behind you," Jayapal said.
"Will you turn to them now and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through with the absolutely unacceptable release of the Epstein files and their information?"
The room went absolutely still, and then something happened no one expected. Jayapal turned toward the back of the room and asked the survivors to stand. For a moment, nothing moved. And then slowly, hands started rising, one, then another, then dozens. Some of them were shaking, some couldn't even lift their hands all the way. Every camera turned, every eye in the room shifted. They weren't statistics anymore, they were right there. 10 full seconds of silence that felt like a verdict. Everyone understood what was happening. This was not a political trap. This was not a designed gotcha moment. It was the simplest human test imaginable. Turn around. See the people your department failed. Say you are sorry. 2 words. No cost, no downside. Just basic human decency from the most powerful law enforcement official in the country. Bondi didn't move. Not a turn of the head, not a glance over the shoulder. She sat rigid at that table, jaw visibly tightening, and then her voice suddenly spiked, sharp and loud, almost shouting, as she jabbed her finger across the table directly at Jayapal. "I'm not going to get in the gutter with this woman. She's doing theatrics." You could actually hear people in the room exhale, like something had just gone too far. Theatrics. That was her word for the women sitting 3 feet behind her. Not a mistake, not a slip under pressure, a decision. Made consciously, deliberately, while the victims were sitting right behind her. That was the official position of the Attorney General of the United States. And that is when Pam Bondii started to lose control of the room, because she had just made the one mistake she could not walk back. The survivors in the back rows didn't react visibly. They had survived things that would have broken most people. They had learned over years of fighting for justice that never fully came, not to show surprise when the powerful revealed exactly what they thought of them. But every camera in that room had captured it. Every microphone had recorded the word. And across the press gallery, reporters were already filing the clip that would define this entire hearing before it was even half over. Jayapal didn't raise her voice. She leaned slightly forward, expression locked, and pressed again. "I'm asking you a simple question. Will you turn around and apologize?" Bondi pivoted entirely, launching into a prepared defense of the Justice Department's document release process, as if the question had evaporated. As if the word theatrics had not just left her mouth on live national television, as if the survivors behind her were furniture. But here's the detail that makes everything Bondi did that day even more disturbing. Here's what she was actually defending in that room, and what the documents showed. Congress had passed a law. The law was unambiguous. Release the Epstein files, full disclosure. Limited and specific exemptions only. The DOJ received a deadline. They missed it. When documents were finally released, investigators who reviewed them found a pattern in the redactions that made legal experts stop cold. One file alone exposed over 30 victim names, emails, even personal details that were supposed to stay protected. While the people connected to Epstein were redacted, the survivors were exposed to the world, not by accident, by the system that was supposed to protect them. The agency sworn to protect them had exposed them to the public a second time, and Pam Bondii was sitting in that room defending it. In some cases, even their home addresses were visible. Zoe Lofgren of California stated it plainly, without theater, without drama. The Justice Department has lost credibility, not as a political attack, as a documented conclusion. Bondi's response was to pivot to Donald Trump, calling him, on the record in a formal congressional hearing, the greatest president in American history. The Attorney General, while being questioned about her department's failure to protect trafficking victims, responded by praising the man whose name appears throughout the Epstein files. The pattern was by that point unmistakable to everyone in the room, but what the documents revealed next made her theatrics comment even worse. Voices started overlapping, members began interrupting each other, the chairman tried to regain control, but the room was already slipping, and Bondi was losing it. For a few seconds, no one was in control of the room. Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, the man who personally wrote the law mandating Epstein file disclosure, pressed Bondi to explain why the DOJ had failed to comply. She tried to deflect blame backward onto previous administrations. Massie stopped her cold. He leaned forward, voice steady and precise. This goes over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion, a Republican saying that. To a Republican attorney general, in a hearing room controlled by Republicans, Bondi went silent. Because there is no answer that survives what the record shows. She wasn't confused. She wasn't caught off guard. She was making a series of conscious choices to deflect, to attack, to perform contempt, while the facts piled up around her and the women she had just called theatrics sat 3 feet behind her back. By the midpoint of the hearing, the confident figure who had walked in had been replaced by something visibly different. Bondi's answers were coming faster, sharper, less controlled. Her hands, folded calmly on the table at the start, were now gripping the desk edge. When Jayapal pressed again on the apology, Bondi's voice climbed another register. When Lofgren cited the documented credibility failures, Bondi deflected to Trump's record, visibly flushed, leaning harder into the microphone. When Massie cornered her on the timeline, her eyes moved rapidly between her notes and the questioner, searching for ground she no longer had. Stage 1 had been confidence. The controlled entrance of someone who believed she had this managed. Stage 2 was defensiveness, answers getting longer, more circuitous, buying time with words while the facts closed in. Stage 3 was aggression, volume replacing substance, finger-pointing replacing arguments, contempt replacing credibility. She was in stage 3 now, and every reporter in that gallery had stopped typing and started watching. Because when a witness reaches stage 3, what comes next is not a recovery. And then it happened. The exact moment she lost the room completely, with every camera locked on her face. And she knew it. You could see it in her face. Jayapal asked one final time, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly, in the same steady register she had used throughout. The silence that followed lasted 15 seconds. 15 full seconds with every camera in the building pointed at Pam Bondi's face. And in those 15 seconds, she made her final choice. She looked past the women behind her. She turned to a different member of the committee. She moved on. Not because she had run out of words, because she had made her decision. The same decision she had made the first time Jayapal asked, and the second time, and every time the question came back around. The survivors were not worth turning for. The clips were spreading before the gavel dropped. Within hours, victim advocacy organizations had issued statements. Legal scholars had documented the redaction inversion. Perpetrators protected, survivors exposed. The image of Bondi's jabbing finger and the word theatrics was on every platform, attached to every story about what the Justice Department had done to the people it was sworn to protect. Some families found out for the first time through those files, not from the victims, from the government. Parents, siblings, people who had no idea what these women had survived suddenly saw it in black and white. That's what this release did. That wasn't justice. That was exposure. The word theatrics will follow Pam Bondii long after every policy she ever defended has been forgotten. Because it wasn't a slip. It wasn't a misstatement from a difficult moment in a long hearing. It was a conscious choice, made while the victims were sitting right behind her. Made on live camera, made with the full authority of her office behind it. She wasn't confused about who was in that room. She knew exactly who was behind her. She chose contempt anyway. And now, everyone who watched that hearing knows exactly what kind of attorney general makes that choice. Do you think what Bondi did was just politics? Or was it a complete betrayal of Epstein's victims? Type betrayal or politics in the comments. I want to see where you stand.
Not been able to meet with this Department of Justice and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through.
I'm not going to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
And I wish that you would turn around to the survivors who are standing right behind you